Shabbat Shalom,
Shabbat
everyone.
Shalom.
We rise together on page 103. Gratitude to be together, to daven, to thank the Holy One. Page 103.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lesech v'bina להבחין בין יום ובין לילה.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher asani b'tzalmo.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשני בת חורי.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשני Yisrael.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam פוקח עברי.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokev gevuvim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokar et al hamayim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gavel.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשה לי כל צורכי.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozeh Yisrael bigvura.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hoter Yisrael b'tifara.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten yaev koach.
Amen.
122. Baruch she'amar ha'olam. Baruch hu was every him was it. Baruch Hashem Elohim Baruch Melchem Ezachem Bochem
יחיד כעולמי מלך משובח ומפואר את שמו הגדול. ברוך אתה אדוני מלך מהולל ותשבחו.
Amen. May be seated.
So Shabbat Shalom,
Shabbat Shalom.
friends, both those who are gathered here in the sanctuary with us, those who are joining us from live stream, we feel your presence, and it's a gift to be together this Shabbat morning. So we are in Parashat Vayigash. We are making our way towards the very end of the book of Genesis, and so we're deep into the narrative of Joseph. And in this week's Torah portion, Joseph reunites, reveals his identity to his brothers and reunites with them. And then later on in the Parsha, we actually have a moment of reunification between Joseph, Yosef, and his father Yaakov, Jacob. Of course, after many, many years in which Yaakov believed that Yosef was actually dead. So many powerful moments of reunion, reunification. But there's actually a very interesting line that describes the way in which Joseph and Jacob reunite. And it says that as they hugged one another and fell on each other's necks, he cried, that only one of them cried. And that one is presumed to be Joseph. So why is it, the commentators ask, that Jacob did not cry after all those years? And of course, in good Jewish tradition, many answers are offered, but in a text that we studied this week, a beautiful suggestion was offered that by Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, I believe, that in a sense, Jacob was cried out. He had cried for so many years, there were no more tears left to shed. Whereas Joseph, who had been sort of holding all these years, wondering how things would unfold, he had all of this grieving still to do. And so he wept and wept and wept. And for me, tefillah is one of those times, especially on Shabbat, where there's more space and more time. It's an amazing moment for us to look inside as we quiet the noise on the outside and notice just where we are. What things have we yet to feel? And what things have we sort of felt out, so to speak? So that's perhaps an intention, a kavanah. What have we yet to express gratitude for, and what are we overflowing with gratitude so that there's almost no words left to say. So we continue this morning with a special psalm for Shabbat, page 134. Mizmor shir leyom HaShabbat tov lehodo
Adonai zamer shivayom ale asor enave
Magalu masachaya me'olam
ish vayodrim itpadu koplei aven tabit reshav shetuni veter neb chatzot en yofichu
Lehagi yashar
Adonai Zuri
Velo Avalatavu. We continue now with Ashrei on page 136. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Oy Alleluia Oy Alleluia Ashrei
מלכותך מלכות כל המשם. מכובסה שם קודשנו.
אנחנו נברך מעתה ועד עולם. Hallelujah. And we continue now with concluding our Psukei de Zimra with Psalm 150, which is on page 141. We'll take a moment to appreciate all the instruments, all the diversity of not only music, but the diversity of all life that comes together to create the beautiful song that is our lives. And to be grateful for the spirit that binds us all together and that animates all living beings. Hallelujah, 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 Hallelujah.
נשמה,
תהללויה,
הללויה, hallelujah.
So we take a deep breath, neshima amuka. As we prepare for Nishmat Kol Chai, page 145.
Bottom 146.
לדוד ברכי נפשני לכל גרמי את שם קודשו האל בצעצמות עוזך הגדול בכבוד שמך הגיבור לנצח הנורא בנורותיך המלך היושב על כיסא רם ונישא
147.
שוכן על נהרו וקדוש שמו וכתוב בנו צדיקים באדוני לשיירים נבטתי הילה
בפי שרים תתעלה
ובדברי צדיקים תתברך
ובלשון חסידות תתרומם
ובקרב קדושים תתקדש ובקלות לבבות עמך בית ישראל להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפעול, לרומם, להדר, לברך, לקלס על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות. דוד בן ישי, עבדך ושיחך, ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו.
148.
ברכות והודאות מטבי העולם ברוך אתה אדוני המלך גדול בתשבחות אל הודעות אדון הנפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך אל העולמי מתגדל מתקדש שמרבה נלמד תברח ירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובמלכון ובחית כל בית ישראל בגלה בזמן קריב ימרו אמן ישמר בעבורה לעולם לא מהבעיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר, ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי לקודשה,
בריחוה.
לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תשבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה וימרו.
Amen. 149, slight bow.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
Page 150 may be seated.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם יוצר ובורא חושך עושה שלום ובורא את הכל.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו
יוצר אור וחושך עושה שלום ובורא את הכל. עושה שלום ובורא את הכל. כל יודותיך וישבחוך קדוש אדוני מוציא חמה ממקומה ומקום שיטה ובטובו מגרש בהם דמים מעשה ואישים.
אין ככך אדוני אלוהינו בעולם הזה ואין זולתך מקינו לחיי עולם הבא. תספיותך גואל לנו את המשיח ואין דמן חמשנו לתחיית המתים.
151
אל אדון הכל המעשים ברוך ומבורך ומכל נשמה גדלו וטובו לעולם ועד עוזבונה טוב ומיבדו המתגאה על החי עוד הכל ונדע וכבוד על המרכבה.
שבת ולהודות לאדוני לפיכך יברכו מנחם מנוחה של קודש תתברך צורי נמוקר Top 153
כולם
אהובים
כולם
ראויים גיבורים לעמוסים באימה וביראה קונם אויביהם
מקדושה ותורה ושירה ובזמרה ומברך
ומכתישים וממליכים את שם האל המלך הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, הקדוש הוא למקבלים עליהם עוד מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה, יוצרם בנחת רוח, בשפה ורעה ובנימה, קדושה כולם כאחד עונים, דברים ביראה קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך הערב אדון, והאופנים וחיות הקודם, ברעש גדול מנסים לעומת סרבים לעומת המשחררים, אומרי ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, הלל ברוך נימות אלך וכייסך השלום, אור חדש,
אור חדש הציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו, ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאור.
We take our tzitzit together to prepare for Shema Yisrael Ava B'Aftanu Nanoenu Hamlag Dorez Rabbanam Rachem Rachem Aleinu Ha'er Einenu V'Dabek Lebinu Nagilim Kau Shotat Avanu
וקרבתנו לשמך הקדוש אלה באמת להודות לך ויחדך באהבה, ברוך אתה אדוני
ברוך שמו
הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה.
Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר הנביא מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם בבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והילדת אפוא בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך.
156 באים שמות
והיה אם שמות ישמעו על מזבחי שערים. ושמו קיים וכיסא נכון ומלכותו ומונתו לעד קיימת.
157
אמת שאתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו מלכנו מלך אבותינו ואמותינו גואלנו גואל אבותינו ואמותינו יוצרנו צור ישועתנו עודנו ומצילנו מעולם שמך אין אלוהים זולתך עזרת אבותינו ואמותינו אתה ומעולם.
Middle 158.
Yalla la 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 yalla la 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 yalla la la
Our feet together towards Yerushalayim. 159 to 161, we daven together. The rest is personal, silent prayer.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham ופוקד שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע משיב הרוח מוריד הגשם מחכה לחיים בחסד מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים
סומך נופלים והופך עולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בגבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מלך המתים. אמן.
נקדש את שמך העולם, כשם הקדישים, אותו בשמרו. הקדוש על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש 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 אל נצבאות, ולכל הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק, משמיעים קול, מתנסים לעומת סרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומך מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך, מתי תמלוך בציון, בקרוב בימינו, לעולם ועד תשכון ידי תתקדש בתוך ירושלים, עירך לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים, ועינינו תראנה מלכותך כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך, על ידי דוד משיח צדקך, ימלוך עלינו לעולם, אלוהי ציון לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד קודמך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושפחך אלוהינו מפילולים ושני עולם ועד, כי על מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
אמן.
במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ויאמרו יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה ועלמא תברך יהודי וימליך מלכותה וחיי חונו במכון ובחי תכל בית ישראל בגלה בזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולם ועלמא יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו לעילם מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא ויאמרו אמן תתקבץ לטון ובטון דחו ישראל קדם אבוהון דבישמע ויאמרו אמן יהי שלמה רב משמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן עושה שלום ממרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ויאמרו אמן. אין כמוך אלוהים אדוני ואין כמעשיך מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים ובמשלתך בכל דור ודור ויהי מנשוא אהרון ויאמר משה קומה אדוני ויפוצו אוהליך וינוסו משנאיך מפניך כי בציון תצא תורה כי בציון תצא תורה ודבר אדוני בירושלים ברוך שנתן תורה תורה ברוך שנתן תורה תורה לעמו ישראל וקדושתו שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד
שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד
אלוהינו גדול אדוננו קדוש שמו
אחד אלוהינו גדול אדוננו קדוש שמו
גדול אדוני איתי ונרוממה שמו יחדל לך אדוני הגדולה והגיבורה והתפארת והנצח וההוד
Yehovah Shamayim Uva'as Yehovah. Here we go. Mazel tov, mazel tov. Adonai Amamlacha. Happy birthday, man. Boom. Romemu, Romemu, Adonai Eloheinu, Ve'ishtachavu, Ve'ishtachavu, L'Adam Raglav Kadoshu. Romemu, Romemu, Adonai Eloheinu, Ve'ishtachavu, Ve'ishtachavu, Lehar Godsho, Igadosh Adonai Eloheinu, Oseh Shalom b'mromav, Hu yaseh Shalom aleinu, ve'al Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru, amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Great to see such a wonderful chevra here in person, as well as, of course, online as well. And have some of our people have come back for a kind of round 2 celebration because of the pandemic. We have some amazing of our B-Mitzvah students now who are post, but coming back to a little kind of like a little taste back. We're so excited and grateful to have you back here to celebrate. Such a blessing. So, we're beginning now with Parashat Vayigash. As Rabbi Jenny noted, this is still in the midst of the Joseph story. The Joseph story takes a number of Torah portions, but this one here is the primary kind of main climactic moment is the reconciliation here between Joseph and his brothers, a lot of issues, and Joseph and Jacob even come back together in this Torah portion. We are in Genesis 46, verse 28. So Breshit, verse 28, page 283. And we're calling up for the first aliyah. The bat mitzvah stuff, nachon? ויעזור בגין ושיעשים בו ונאמר מן הכל הבו גודו לנו הנו כבוד לתורה תעמוד חנמיה בת חיים דוד ומלכה לעלייה ראשונה ברוך שתן תול מויס בקדושתו ואתם מפיקים אדוני לכם חייהם היום.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Ve'et Yehuda shalach lefanav el Yosef. Lecharot lefanav Goshna, vayavohu artza Goshen, vayasor Yosef merkavto, vaya'al bigrat Yisrael aviv Goshna, vayera elav, vayipol al tzavarav, vayevk al tzavarav od, vayomer Yisrael. El Yosef amut hapam acharei re'oti et panecha ki yodecha
Shekayach.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'hayei olam nata b'dochinu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Shekach kol hakavod. So, Sophia, we were going back, me and Maura Kathy, with you and all of our B-Mitzvah kids who were celebrating this Shabbat, and remembering back to your Devar Torah from a long time ago. I assume you remember it very, very well. Of course, okay, good, making sure, okay. Because you talked about this important phrase in the Torah portion you studied of Am Segula. Remember this? The treasured people. And you, Rashi makes a whole comment on this, what makes us special, it's in the mitzvot. but you decided in a very proper rabbinic Jewish fashion, okay, to give a little criticism there and say, wait a second, what do you mean be a treasured people? Is any people treasured? In fact, we should honor all peoples should be treasured. In fact, we should treasure the diversity of all the people in the world and all those things. It's a very profound comment, particularly in our current situation right now in the United States and our world, where we're coming to recognize sometimes our prejudices make us think that one group is treasured or not, et cetera, that all groups should be treasured. But I want to remind you what I think I said back then, if I remember correct. I have some memory back there. But the truth is, you're treasured, okay? You're treasured not only by the amazing mishpacha you have, but by this congregation, okay? We're partial to you and the other B'nai Mitzvot, okay, also as well. Because when we really have someone as part of your own mishpacha and family and you're proud of them, it's okay to say, hey, I'm proud of them. It's different the way we feel about you than some other B-Mitzvah across the world. Because we're grateful that you've come to support this congregation and this Torah and shown your commitment again in the pandemic. You showed us why you're treasured because you demonstrated through your amazing actions. We are so proud of you. Mazel tov and kol hakavod. Beautiful. All right. So we now to our second aliyah. We are in Genesis chapter 46, verse 31, page 283. And for this, we're calling Mr. Stambler for the aliyah. Ken. Yamoda Gadal Yitzchak ben Eliyahu Dvina V'Dina Raizel aliyah Hashinit. Verse 31, second aliyah.
Baruch Adonai Hamvara.
Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Vayomer Yosef el Echav el Beit Aviv elev agid al Faro. Ve'amra elav achai Beit Avi asher be'eretz Canaan ba'u elai anashim ro'et zon ki anshei mikneh hayu zonam uvakaram v'chol asher lahem eviu ve'haya ki yikra lachem paro ve'amar mamasechem ve'amartem anshei mikneh hayu avadecha Mina ureinu ve'ad ata gam anachnu gam avotenu ba'avur teshvu be'eretz Goshen ki tovat Mitzrayim kol ro'et zon.
Oh, shekayach.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natav b'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen. Shekach. Okay, Gabe, our mensch. Back in the day, again, I can't believe how many B'nai Mitzvot we've had during COVID, but unbelievable. You as well brought an amazing Torah portion, a more complicated idea, an idea that a lot of us, all of us struggle with the issue of Jacob and Esau. Remember this whole thing? I assume you remember your Devar Torah. Okay, good. Because me and Kathy were talking about it. It sets up a kind of stereotypes through Jewish history. Jacob is always the good guy. Esau is always the bad guy, and kind of goes down in Jewish history, Rome, and you taught this idea, which is a really kind of profound idea, that the rabbis, they kind of decide that all of this is always the bad person, always attacking us, and no matter where in Jewish history, it's always coming the bad guy. But you noted, it's not so clear in the text who's the bad guy. And this is a little exaggerated over time. And it just proves that stereotypes are a problem in all situations, even within our own traditions. Stereotypes are a problem. And you were not afraid to criticize and look inward into the tradition you love and you embrace, and you came for the Torah, but say, hey, it's not so great to have stereotypes here inside as well. And I'm willing to speak up and say something about that. And again, like Sophia, so profound in our current times where we're raising our consciousness to stereotypes, maybe ones that are more subtle that we don't always pay attention to. You brought that forward as well. Kol hakavod for doing that during a very particular sensitive time. We are so proud of you. You did an amazing, amazing job. You are a mensch. That's your stereotype, is you're a mensch, okay? Yesher koach. Beautiful job. Awesome. We now turn to our third aliyah, verse 1, page 284. Tamod, Tzipora Pearl, Bat Shimshon v'Chana Pesha, l'aliyah shlishit.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'charbanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayavo Yosef vayaged leFaro vayomer aviva achai v'tzonam uvkaram v'chol asher lahem ba'u be'eretz Canaan v'hinam be'eretz Goshen umiktei echav lakach hamisha anashim v'yatzigem lifnei Faro vayomer Paro el echav mama asechem vayomru el Paro Ro'et son avadecha gam anachnu gam avotenu vayomruhu el Paro lagur ba'aretz banu ki ein mireh latzon asher la'avadecha ki kaved hara'av ba'eretz Canaan ve'ata yeshvuna avadecha be'eretz Goshen vayomer Paro el Yosef Lemor avicha ve'achecha ba'u elecha Eretz Mitzrayim lefanecha hihi, v'meitava aretz oshev et avicha v'et achecha, yeshvu be'eretz Goshen v'im yadata, v'yishbaham anshe chayiho v'samtam, sarai mikneh al asher li.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'toheinu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen. Beautiful job. Beautiful job. We now turn to our fourth aliyah. We're in verse 7, page 285. And as Charlotte's coming forward, we invite all to please rise. We'll offer a special prayer for Holiem, for those that are ill. As I pause in this prayer, I invite you to quietly offer the names of those you're holding in your heart who are in need of healing. Misheberach avotenu, Avram Yitzchak Yaakov imotenu sarif karachel v'leah, hu yivarech v'rapeh et acholim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimlei Rachamim Aleihem Lachzikam Rapotam V'yishlach Lehem Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim Fat HaNefesh Fat HaGuf V'toch Shar Cholim V'chazeh Kedei Yoskim B'Sarcheihem Shabbat Mizo Krofa Krova Lavo Ashta Baglav Izman Kariv V'nomar Amen. May the Holy One who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah bring blessing and healing to all those we pray for. May the Holy One mercifully restore them to health and vigor, granting them spiritual and physical well-being, together with all others who are ill. May God grant strength to those who tend to them. The Shabbat is a time to refrain from crying out. We hope and pray that healing is at hand, and let us say together.
Amen.
Elana Revana La, Elana Revana La, Elana Revana La, Revuah Shelema. Elana Revana La, Elana Revana La, Elana Revana La, Revuah Shelema. You may be seated. So verse 7, page 285.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen.
Vayaveh Yosef et Yaakov aviv, vayamidehu lifnei Faro, vayavarech Yaakov et Paro, vayomer Paro el Yaakov, kama yemei shnei chayecha vayomer Yaakov el Paro yemei shnei migurai shiloshim at shana me'at v'ra'im hayu yemei shnei chayai v'lo hisigu et yemei shnei chayei avotai bimei migurehem vayavarech Yaakov et Paro vayetze milifnei Paro Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yishakor. Charlotte, kol hakavod. So Charlotte, we were looking back and thinking about your amazing Devar Torah back in the day. Now your Torah portion, Vayera, is one of them. I mean, a lot of them in Genesis are chock full, but that one is like, so much in there. And you chose to focus on this little story. It's a little less well-known. I want to focus on it, but you pulled it right out about Abraham and Sarah and Avimelech. I remember the story. I'm sure you remember it well. And Abraham lies in order to, quote-unquote, protect Sarah with Avimelech. He's worried, thinks maybe I'll lie, say she's my sister, not my wife, etc., different things. And basically use that as a launch pad to go into, which is there's a lot of discussion in Jewish literature, and the rabbis get into, is it okay to lie? Should you ever lie? Is it ever can you lie in a positive way? Are there such thing as white lies? All these different dynamics. And you got down into the details. Like, you didn't just bring one example. There are many examples. It was really rich. But in the end, you did say it is, on occasion, for the right intention. If you're trying to be a mensch and be nice, you are allowed to lie. By the way, it's consistent with one of the rabbinic famous teachings as well. But what I really loved and appreciate about what you got in there, Charlotte, is you really picked a subject that's a complex subject that really deals a lot with social dynamics even to this day. How do you relate to people? What do you say and how you say it? How do you be sensitive to how people are going to respond to it? And when do you have to really open up and say what you really feel? And when can you be a little bit more careful and appropriate because you're trying to be kind and sensitive? And that's something you have in abundance, Charlotte. So Kol HaKavod is a great teaching. It was very rich. I'm really proud of you. Kol HaKavod. Yishakor. So we turn now to our fifth aliyah. We're in verse 11, page 286. Tamod Rivka Chaya bat Aaron v'Leach Leah l'aliyah chamishit.
Just lost. No, she had it marked for me.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu mikol Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayoshev Yosef et aviv et echav vayiten lachem ahuzah be'eretz Mitzrayim v'metav ha'aretz be'eretz v'masef ka'asher tziva Farber V'chalkel Yosef et aviv et echav et kol peit aviv lechem lefi hatav v'lechem ein mekol haaretz ki kaved haba'av me'od v'tehil eretz Mitzrayim le'eretz Kenan mipanei haba'av v'alaket Yosef et kol ha'kesef הנמצא בארץ מצרים ובארץ כנען, בשבר אשר הם שורים, ויבא יוסף את הכסף בתפרבו, ויתום הכסף מארץ מצרים, ומארץ כנען, ויבואו כל מצרים אל יוסף לאמור, הבה לנו לכם, ולמה נמות נגדך, כי יופס כסף. ויאמר יוסף, הבו מקניהם, ואתנה לכם במקניהם ימופס כסף. ויביאו את מקניהם אל יוסף, וייתן להם יוסף לחם בסוסים, ובמקנה הצאן, ובמקנה הבקר, ובהמורים ונהלים ולחם, בכל מקניהם בשנה ההיא. ותיתום השנה ההיא, ויבואו אליו בשנה השנית, ויאמרו לו, לא נכהן מאדוני, כי אם תם הכסף ומקנה הבהמה אל אדוני, לא נשאר לפני אדוני בלתי עם גבעתנו ואדמתנו, למה נמות לעיניך, גם אנחנו, גם אדמותינו, קנה אותנו ואת אדמתנו בלחם, ונהיה אנחנו ואדמתנו עבדים לפרעה, ותן זרע ונהיה ולא נמות, והאדמה לא תשם.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמס וחיי עולם נותד בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Shekach, kol hakavod. This time for the sixth Aliyah, I invite up the Farber, Stambler, and Leach parents, the proud parents that come out this time. Yamdu kol hamishpachot l'Aliyah hashishit. So if I'm correct, is Henry here? Somewhere, Henry here? Henry, I'm calling up the Farber, Stambler, and Leaches.
Yeah,
Okay?
they're all
Okay,
coming.
yeah. Okay, just making sure. Just making sure. Comparing notes. Mazel tov, guys. Mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov. Okay. Here we go. The Ganza Mishpacha here. This is great. All right. We'll all come close around together. Okay. Awesome. Are we ready? Better spot. There we go. Melissa's got it. All right.
Baruch Adonai Hamborah.
Baruch Adonai Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim
Natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai.
noten haTorah.
Amen.
Okay, awesome. Should have held it up.
Amen. Vayiken Yosef et kol admat Mitzrayim liFarao, ki machru Mitzrayim ish sadehu, ki hazak alehem hara'av, ve'et haaretz liFarao, vatihi haaretz liFarao, ve'et ha'am ha'evir oto, le'erim miktei, Givol Mitzrayim viad katzehu, Rach Admat HaKohanim Lo Karna Ki Hokla Kohanim Me'ed Paro Ve'achlu Et Hukam Asher Natan Lachem Paro Al Kain Lo Machru Et Admatam.
Shekaya. Beautiful.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Okay, we're going to cover the Torah. I invite all to please rise for a second. Parents, come a little closer here. You can stand up a little bit here. Okay. So usually just the B-Mitzvah kids get the mazel tov, but you're going to get one in a second, okay, guys? Because let me give you a little Torah like this. I taught this actually on my morning Torah as well. So in this Torah portion, Joseph finally gets reunited with his family, and basically his brothers and he have a lot of issues. And the brothers, when he reveals himself, the brothers think, oh my God, he's going to be so angry at us. We sold him into a pit. And Joseph says this famous line, what? Everything you meant bad for me, God actually meant it was good for me. Now, that theology, that like bad things happen, but like it happened for a reason, some of you know I'm not so into that theology. A lot of us aren't into that theology. But one of the profound points of this is that Joseph has a difficult moment in his life, or set of moments, and instead of telling the story that it was only terrible, which it was, he also finds a way to see it as a positive story of his life. He turns a bad moment into an opportunity to see it as a triumph. I want to say to you guys as parents, okay? On some level, the story of this pandemic is you and others were stolen the opportunity to have the nachas, the kind of quote-unquote typical, which some of you have with other siblings already, all right? And it was taken from you, and it was taken from these guys, and it's terrible. There's nothing around that is good in that sense. And plus, there's been people who have died. I mean, it's been scary. People couldn't come in. And at the same time, you taught your kids what it means to triumph, what it means to be resilient. And I think even most profoundly as Jewish parents, you taught your kids that our Jewish people continues and thrives under all circumstances. Someday they'll look back on this year and you'll say, oh my God, this one was a tough one amongst us because of all these things. And we'll also tell the story, but we also were the ones that kept the tradition going under the most challenging circumstances. You have done that excellently. And for that, you get a mazel tov. All right? Simin tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, simin tov, simin tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, simin tov, simin tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, simin tov. Hey lano, hey lano, hey lano, oh Israel. Beautiful job. So, we now turn to our seventh aliyah. We are on verse 23, page 288. Sean is our reader. She'll find the spot. Yamod Yosef Zisa ben Dov aliyah hashvi'it. So we're on verse 23. Yes, you can. Verse 23, page 288.
Baruch Hu es Adonai HaBorah. Baruch Adonai HaBorach Le'olam V'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher B'chabanu Mikol Hamim V'nosan Lanu Es Toraso. Baruch Atah Adonai Nosein HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayomer Yosef el ha'am, hein kaniti etchem hayom, ve'et hatmatechem lefaro, הלכם זרע וזרעתם את האדמה, והיה בתבואות ונתתם חמישית לפרעה, וארבע הידות אדוני לך יהיה לכם לזרע השדה ולך לכם ולאשר בבתיכם ולאכול את אפכם, ויאמרו החייתנו נמצא חן בעיני אדוני, והיינו עבדים לפרעה, וישם אותה יוסף לחוק עד יום הזה, עד היום הזה, על אדמת מצרים לפרעה לחומש, רק אדמת הכהנים לבדם לא הייתה לפרעה, וישב ישראל בארץ מצרים בארץ גושן, ויאחזו בה ויפרו וירבו מאוד.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נושא התורה.
Rise together. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ויאמר דברך חירותי והמליך מלכותי. וישתבח ויתבר וירמה וינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמר קודשם בריחו לילה מקום ברכתה ושירתה ושמחתה ונחמתה דמירם ויאמרו Amen. May be seated or maftir aliyah, verse 25, page 288. Yamod Yaakov Moshe ben Eliyahu Rachalea al Maftir, verse 25.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayomru hechayitanu nimtza chen ba'anei Adoni, vayinu havadim lefaro, vayasem ota Yosef lechok ad yom hazeh, ad hayom hazeh. El admat al admat Mitzrayim lifaro lachomesh rak admat hakohanim livadam lo haita lifaro vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Mitzrayim be'eretz Goshen ויאחזו בה, ויפרו וירבו מאוד.
Baruch Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Shekoach. We now rise. Let's address the Sefer Torah. Yamon Yisrael Ber Ben Hulul B'Shul Rivka Magbiat Amod Malka Sarbat Figav Avraham Agoleled V'zot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Livnei Bnei Yisrael Abi Adonai
B'yad Moshe
Sefer Torah is placed down. You may be seated, everyone. Continue on with the Haftarah. You can find the Haftarah on page 291 in your Chumashim, Ezekiel chapter 37.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher bachar bin v'im tovim v'ratzav divrehem ha'ne'amarim be'emet Baruch atah Adonai Habocher b'Torah uv'Moshe avdoho uv'Yisrael amoho uv'inviei ha'emet v'tzedek.
Amen.
Vayhi dvar Adonai elai lemor ve'ata v'nadam kach lecha eitz echad uchtov alav lihudah v'livnei Yisrael chaveirav v'lakach eitz echad uchtov alav liyosef eitz Ephraim v'chol beit Yisrael chaveirav v'karavotam echad el echad lecha le'etz echad v'hayu lachadim beyadecha v'cha'asher yomeru elecha b'nei amecha lemor halotagid lanu ma'ele lach daber alehem ko amar Adonai Elohim hinei ani lokeach et eitz Yosef asher biad Ephraim v'shivtei Yisrael chaveirav v'natati otam alav et eitz Yehudah v'asitim le'etz echad v'hayu echad biyadi v'hayu ha'etzim asher tichtov aleihem beyadecha le'eneihem Vaydaber Alehem Ko Amar Adonai Elohim Hine ani lokeach et bnei Yisrael mi bein hagoyim asher halechu sham vekibatzti otam misaviv veheveti otam el admatam Ve'asiti otam legoy echad ba'aretz beharei Yisrael umelech echad yihyeh lechulam lemelech ve'lo yihyu od lishnei goyim ve'lo yechatzu od Lishtei mamlachot od Velo yitameu od Begilulehem uvshikutzehem uvchol pishehem Vehoshati otam Mikol moshvotehem Asher chateu vahem V'tiharti otam V'hayuli le'am Va'ani Ehyeh lahem le'Elohim Ve'avdi David melech alehem Ve'ro'eh echad yihyeh lechulam Uvmishpatai elechu Ve'chukotai yishmeru Ve'asu otam Ve'yashivu al ha'aretz Asher natati le'avdi le'Yaakov Asher yashivu va'avotechem V'yashivu aleha hema uvneihem v'neihem adolam V'David avdihi nasi lahem le'olam V'charati lahem berit shalom berit olam yihyeh otam V'natatim v'hirbeti otam V'natati et mikdashi b'tocham le'olam V'haya mishkani alehem V'hayiti lahem le'Elohim V'hema yihyu li la'am Ve'yadeu hagoyim ki ani Adonai mekadesh et Yisrael bihyot mikdashi betocham le'olam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol haolamim tzadik b'chol hadorot ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer ve'oseh ha'medaber u'mkayem shekol devarav emet v'tzedek ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu v'ne'emanim devarecha V'davar echad midvarecha achor lo yashuv rekam ki el melech ne'eman v'rachaman atah Baruch atah Adonai
Baruch v'shmo
ha'el ha'ne'eman b'chol devarav
Amen
Rachem al Tzion Zion ki hi beit chayenu v'la'aluvat nefesh toshia bimheira v'yameinu baruch ata Adonai mesameach Sion bivaneha samechenu Adonai Eloheinu be'eliyahu hanavi avdecha uv'malchut beit David mishichecha bimheira yavo v'yagel libenu al ki solo yeshev zar ve'lo yinchalu od achirim et kivodoho ki v'shem kod shechanish batalo shelo yichbe neiro leolam va'ed baruch ata Adonai Magen David Al haTorah v'al ha'avodah v'al ha'nevi'im v'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likdusha v'limnucha lechavod ultifaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach umvarachim otach yitbarach shimcha befi kol chai Tamid le'olam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai Kadesh
Amen. Shekoach, kol hakavod. Beautiful job. We rise now on page 183. Invite those honored to escort and carry the sacred Torah to come forward this time. We continue with Yahalalu.
יהללו את שם אדוני, כי נשגב שמו לבדו. אדון ארץ ושמיים, וירא כרם לעמו. תהילה לכל חסידיו, לבני ישראל עם קרובו. הללויה. השתחוו לאדוני באדרת קודש. כל אדוני המים מרכבות עירים, אדוני המים רבים. כל אדוני בכוח, כל אדוני בהדר. כל אדוני שובר ארזים, וישבר אדוני את ארזי הלוויות. וירקיתם כמו עגל, לבנות וסריון כמו בן רהימים. כל אדוני חצב להבות אש, כל אדוני יחיל מדבר, יחיל אדוני מדבר קדש, כל אדוני יחלל איילות, ויחס סופיה רעות ובחלו כולו מרכבות, אדוני למבול ישב, וישב אדוני מלך לעולם. Adonai oz le'am yiten, Adonai yibarach et amo v'shalom, et chaim hi למחצית בו, ותום חיה מאושר דרכיה. דרכנו לכל נסיבותיה שלום השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה
Be seated, everyone. This is Ark of Kosher Koach, everyone. Kol hakavod. I believe the Devar Torah now, we've made a new policy. It's on the back of your sheet of Shabbat information.
Yes, so the Devar Torah is on the back of the Shabbat bulletin. Great. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Again, Mazel Tov to all of our families who get double the simcha. We get to celebrate with you once again on your amazing kids and their just process of becoming, which is awesome to watch. So we are in Parashat Vayigash. I don't know, it always feels a little unfair because the story of Joseph is so incredible that somehow, like, it's at the end of Genesis. It doesn't get as much attention as the earlier foremothers and forefathers in our story, but it is so rich. And if you've ever seen the musical Joseph in his Technicolor Dreamcoat, you get a little bit more of the flavor. But we're going to dive into a very specific moment. I was privileged to learn from one of my greatest Torah teachers in life was Judy Klitzner, who's a teacher at Pardes in Jerusalem. And she taught us a literary way of reading the Torah, which she learned from her teacher, Nechama Leibowitz. May she rest in peace. And one of the things that you learn when you're studying the Torah in a very literary way is that, of course, no word is extra. Every word has put layers and layers of meaning. And some of the easiest words to gloss over are names and places. And so I don't know, any of you, there's actually a lot of Torah readers here in the sanctuary this morning. So any of you who have ever gotten a Torah reading section where there's lots of places, lots of names, it's easy to feel like, just kind of rush through. This is all very obscure, and what does it mean anyway? Well, we're going to look a little bit more closely, specifically at a name and a place, and see what kind of meaning we might derive from these important details. All right, so where we are in the story right now, where we're going to dive in, is that, of course, Joseph and his father Jacob have been separated all these years because Joseph made his way up the ranks just to be right under Pharaoh. He is leading Egypt. His father is back in the land of Canaan. His brothers, who are in Egypt, go back to Canaan to tell Jacob that, in fact, Joseph is alive, and Joseph is actually leading Egypt. And Jacob is now going to make his way back to Egypt, which is full of all kinds of emotions. Not only the emotions we could imagine of reuniting with a son whom you've thought was killed and long gone, but also what it means for him to be going back to Egypt and all that, his job was to get to Canaan. So what does it mean now to go back to Egypt? And he has all kinds of fears and feelings about that. All right, is that a sufficient amount of background?
Totally.
All right, so that's where we are. So Jacob is now about to, or he's on his way from the land of Canaan to Egypt to reunite with Jacob. All right, so Rabbi Eric, you'll read the verse in Genesis 46.
So it says here, so Yisrael, which is Jacob's other name, Israel and Jacob, same thing. So Yisrael, Yaakov, set out with all that was his, and he came to Beersheba, where he offered sacrifices to the God of his father, Yitzchak. So Beersheba in southern Israel is kind of making his way down to Egypt. He offers sacrifices to the God of his father, Isaac. Okay? That's what it says in Genesis. Want to read the commentary next?
Exactly. So we're going to specifically, we could have just read right over this verse.
Right.
But just the fact that it said he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Now, he could have said to the God, just to God, or he could have said to God, father of, God of my grandfather Abraham, which it says in other places. So what is Rashi's going to explain a little bit here about why it's God of my father Isaac?
Okay. The duty of honoring one's father is more imperative than that of honoring one's grandfather, as we learn in Genesis Rabbah. Therefore, the sacrifices are associated with the name of Yitzchak and not that of with that of Abraham.
All right. So before we go any further, I just want to raise the question: what is the importance of adding that he was offering sacrifices, of course, not only to God, but specifically to God of his father, Yitzchak? Why might it be more important to honor your father, your parent, than your grandparent? And of course, there's no wrong answers. So anything that comes to mind.
We'd love to hear some grandparents here. Right?
Yeah,
Getting
yeah.
dissed a little bit here.
All right,
Okay.
Shelley.
Normally, the parents are the ones that raise you. So, the grandparent has input, but the day-to-day raising of a child is the parent, so.
Great. Okay, so Shelley is giving a perfectly simple and wonderful answer. In most cases, the parents are the ones doing the day-to-day healing. They're doing that, but they're doing the day-to-day caretaking. They're changing the diapers. They're doing all the things in terms of responsibility of day-to-day care, and so they get the reward. They get the honor. All right, Jeff, and we'll go Dan.
So, going with your introduction on literary interpretation, this could be nothing more than foreshadowing the commandments.
Beautiful. Wow. Great. You want to say?
Having gone through this recently with the death of my parents, that's particularly deep meaning to me what that means.
Yes, Jeff.
How you practice that as a child.
Yeah, beautiful.
Jeff is saying this is a foreshadow. Look, we're in Genesis. We yet not have quote unquote given the Torah yet, so we don't have the mitzvah of which is the Ten Commandments of honor your mother and father, and that's a very particular phrase Jeff is touching on. Honor is unique, is a particular word. It doesn't say love, doesn't say obey. It says honor. Jeff is saying sadly because he's in a situation where his parents are deceased, so he feels this very profoundly, and what that particular verb. So this is like a foreshadowing of the idea that this is coming forward. Not honor your grandparents, not that you shouldn't honor them, but the mitzvah is to honor your parents, and it's a commandment. You have to do it, even if it's more complicated. You fit.
All right, Dan, then Shauna.
Well, he's of his father's seed, and so you have a direct descendancy there, also in Jewish ritual. The determination of whether you were an Israelite or a Levi or a Kohen is based upon what your father was.
Okay, great. So the fact that he's making a reference here to his father because later on, that sense of where you fit in the tribes of Israel is something that comes through your father. Great. All right, Shauna. So Shauna is suggesting that because Yitzchak is his father, it's so close, that relationship is not one that you have to reach back and remember and sort of have a sense of this abstract connection. It is very intimate. It is present. And I think that's very powerful given that in this moment, I mean, he is filled with all kinds of fear and emotion and sadness and excitement and one could imagine feeling extremely unmoored and sort of destabilized in this moment. And so he reaches not to a very close to the God of his father, which is near to him. Yes, Nathan. Very beautiful.
That's a great point.
Yeah, so Abraham was the first to worship God alone, but Yitzchak was really the first one to worship God for the full extent of his life, to be born into that. So there's a way in which he's drawing on that connection. Very nice, Nathan. Yeah. Yes, Ellen.
Very nice.
For each person. So when I looked at the text, it's not clear in the text that Jacob actually knew Abraham. Because he sort of just
Yes.
I care about Isaac's God,
Mm.
but I care about my own God.
Nice. So Ellen's reminding us that in the Amidah, when we begin that prayer and we bow, we remind ourselves that it's God of Abraham. We repeat again, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. And one of the understandings of that is that God has we have an individual relationship with God, each of us in a very particular way. And so there's something about this particular moment for Yaakov that he wanted to connect to the quality of relationship between God and his father. Yes, excellent. All right, Stuart, then Bonnie. Yeah.
Well, you said that the literature. This is the same person who lied to his father to get the blessing and left. And then in a curious part afterwards, he challenges God. He says, if you take care of me, you'll be my God.
Yes.
Now, going all these years later, he's trying to make amends and say,
Very nice.
I will believe in the same God my father. To reconcile the entire story.
Oh, wow. That's
Very
so
nice.
great.
Very
I love how Stuart's making a connection between where Yaakov was at an earlier part of his life in which he's connecting to God, but he's somewhat skeptical, you could even say, or unaware. And then once he has this connective moment as he's lied and left his own father, he sort of makes a deal, a bargain with God. Like, if you take care of me, then I'll follow you. And now here he is in this moment, and his relationship with God is much more solid. There's a maturity. There's a unconditionality, you could say. And sure enough, right after this verse, God does sort of, Yaakov has a moment in which he encounters God and says, here I am, here I am. So beautiful. I love that. Bonnie.
Okay.
I'm not sure there's a kind of profundity to this, but we have one father, and yet we have two grandfathers. So maybe we just need to home in on this is the person whose lead you follow. There are tree branches up, and you can keep the branches to go up in the ancestors, but you only have your one father.
So perhaps Bonnie's saying it suggests, like the uniqueness of that relationship between parent and child. That though you can always go up in generations, there's something important about noticing that bond. Did I get that, Bonnie? Okay. All right, great. Oh, Susan, and then we'll go on to the next little interesting piece. Yeah, go ahead. Great.
So I'm thinking that Rashi may have struck a chord of discontent, if not during his time, but certainly afterwards, because one interpretation may be that if the parents are more immediate and would be able to contemporize somewhat some of the laws and apply it to their children. And so perhaps he's suggesting that we use this text in Torah to look at the greater world and not so much rely on tradition. And so when I think about, the variation of Jewish practices, this may not be a text which would be wholly embraced.
Do you want to? You did.
Okay.
No, it's okay. It was a complicated comment.
Okay, so what I'm grabbing from Susan's comment here basically is the idea that the parent is being closer in generation. She used the word contemporize, so I was thinking about it. Can make it more understandable, I guess, to the generation that comes after. Is that what you're basically saying? Like, they can make it relevant? For the here and now. Got it. So he's making it relevant to the here and now. Suppose the grandparent might be in a different generational time, in different context and situations. Here, I have a couple of thoughts about this too, but we'll be on to the next thing. Shall I read the next one?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the next commentary going further on
And
this.
the next question is really, why Beersheba? Why mention that was his stopping point?
Okay.
And the Midrash is going to build out an answer, which I think is very rich for us.
Okay, so where was Jacob going? Rabbi Nachman said he was going to cut the cedar trees that his grandfather Abraham planted in Beersheba. This was not the end of the story for these cedar trees. Hundreds of years later, the Israelites took these cedar trees with them when they left Egypt. These were the very same cedar trees later used in the desert to construct the Mishkan, later called the Tabernacle. So basically, Jacob's going down, stopping at Beersheba, not necessarily per se only to honor his father, but to get certain trees that are going to be kind of used in future generations.
Yes, and that those trees actually bring us back to Abraham, who
And then take us
planted
forward.
them. And then they're going to carry us all the way forward to the trees that will be used to construct that sort of mini temple, that mini sanctuary that the Israelites carried with them through the wilderness. Okay. Do you want to jump in with some of your thoughts?
Well, I assume that the reason you bring this text here to the bottom is because you're basically saying there's attention to the parent, the grandparent. This one now, so on the one hand, Rashi is basically saying it's honor the father, and the Midrash is basically saying, well, it's actually in some way degree to honor or carrying the tradition of the grandfather.
Yes, that's sort of part one. And part two is, I think, a bigger question about continuity and sort of psycho-spiritually why that's important and how that changes over the course of one's lifetime. So, for example, like, how we feel about our parents when we're young children may be different, I imagine, in most cases, than how we feel about our parents when we become parents or when our parents age. And why, and I guess part three is like, why is it important to connect with the physicality, the embodiment of that relationship, whether it's in the trees or in the sacrifices? And maybe there are things that you have in your home, heirlooms that connect you back to parents or connect you back to grandparents. Why is that important? It's just stuff. It's just stuff. Why is it special stuff?
So I mean, I'm really touched by this tension or complexity, because one way to read this is, and I was very touched by something that Jeff said. He goes by, he gives the sacrifices the God of his father, right? It could be done in a sense like a testament, but even if you don't agree with the God of your father, right? It's out of respect for the quote-unquote God of your father. Even if Jacob has a total different relationship or doesn't fully accept that one, or it's not his personal relation, he's doing it out of respect. Now, I want to come back to the grandparent one. It's so, because the sad reality is not everyone is blessed with grandparents for a variety of reasons. Grandparents who die young, complex family dynamics. But it is powerful, that unique relationship with the grandparent one can have, and even the influence. I feel like anecdotally, the experience I have with a lot of people in our synagogue, but also even amongst rabbis I meet and other friends of ours, it's not, the Jewish journey they took was not just based, or sometimes it was in spite of their parents. Sometimes it's actually influenced by a grandparent figure, even if they didn't know them that well per se, but their commitment to whatever they did in their life, not just in Judaism, but in life, can have a very profound influence on who that person comes to be. And it's a unique relation that if you have the blessing and gift, even of a short time, with a grandparent, what that does. And the typical joke is like, grandparents are great because they come to visit, they don't have to stay, and they can bring all the gifts, they don't have to hang out for the punishments, stuff like that. But there's a beautiful place for that also. Like the parents are the good news, and the parents sometimes have to be the bad news. And there's something very powerful with the tensions, even if they might present life in different ways. That which one is a person attracted to in their life cycle? And it's very powerful too. All right, Yafeh. Other thoughts about this parent versus grandparent going on? Fair enough. Yeah, Jeff, what do you say? As a recent new grandparent, what do you say? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Wow.
Woof.
That was big. All right. So
that's amazing.
To summarize, Jeff was talking about really the generations back all the way to Noah and Abraham. Did you go back? Adam. In the garden. And actually, there's a connection between each of these builders and their trees. And Jeff also makes a connection between genotype and phenotype. Science is not my specialty, but there are the ways that genes travel, through the generations. But then there's also the way that genes get expressed. And we can see that with trees, actually, as we can see them with people. Very powerful, just those connections. Again, both the way in which who we are is a manifestation of the the stuff of life, the actual, like the DNA traveling through, but also then the nurture, the circumstances, the environment in which each one of us gets to grow.
יפה.
Yeah, lots of layers of lines of connection. Sarah.
This is kind of just a question. The text says that they cut the trees, which is something that kills trees, and then you just have the wood. But then it says that hundreds of years later they took the same trees, and wood does not last for hundreds of years, at least at this time without preservation.
And you would know.
So I'm wondering if by cut they actually mean transplant. Like, did they dig up the trees and take them with them?
Is that possible?
I just love the metaphor of it.
I know,
I mean, whether it's possible, I don't know. But
So Sarah's raising the question, if they cut the trees, presumably after a
cedars are
certain
known
amount
to
of
last a
time,
long time, but I
they'll
don't know.
die.
Right.
And how is it possible? So first I have to just say, like, the rabbis had used
Right, they're
great
being creative.
imagination. So it's more a story than a literal teaching, helping us imagine the connection between events over very vast periods of history. But she raises, like, the possibility that what might it have meant to actually transplant a tree, which is a very beautiful metaphor for how we move generation to generation. I'll just tell you, I had a recent connection with that metaphor. Many of you know our son Adi has been in Maine this semester. He's a junior in high school, and he's about to come back. And his teachers, the faculty of the school, had a special Zoom for us parents about how to help our kids re-enter. I mean, they've been in nature for 4 months. They've had no access to their cell phones. They've been in conscious, intentional community, and they're now coming back into the wild world that we're in right now. And one of the teachers invited us to think about our kids as sort of transplanting plants. She's like, I know your kids aren't plants. But it was very beautiful. Like, they're going to come back, and they're going to need a different size container, and they're going to need more of different elements, water and sunshine, and they'll probably have grown some more shoots, and they're different plants. And I really love the way that you're even thinking about that as something that we do generationally. And we think about that in Judaism as well. We want to stay connected to the practices of our ancestors. We want to feel that sense of continuity. Every time, a B-Mitzvot kid comes up here, we feel that generation to generation moment. And we know that as each B-Mitzvah kid gives their speech, they need to develop their own relationship, their own connections. They're going to fit in their own container as it relates to their connection to God. So I really appreciate that. Somebody back over here.
Ronnie.
Yes, Ronnie.
So when we talk about the wood and the objects, they're really stories, right? Back.
Yes.
My Aunt Minnie in White Plains, her father, my great-grandfather, they came here at the turn of the century, bought a house in White Plains, New York. I don't know why. They made wine in the basement in the bathtub. So now I have my Aunt Minnie's cocktail shaker with wine. There's grapes on it.
Wow.
So that object is that reminds me of my family.
Wow.
The winemaking and
Yes.
how did they even get to it?
Yeah.
Yes,
It's a
yes.
great start.
So Ronnie's talking about her Aunt Minnie who came to America in the turn of the century, lived in White Plains, and they made wine in the basement. And she actually has her Aunt Minnie's cocktail shaker, and it connects her back to that. Absolutely. Beautiful. Anyone who hasn't spoken? Yes, Mike and then Yvette.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what's different about the God of Isaac and the God of Abraham, the God of Jacob. And there's something that Isaac's a real accomplished character to me because he's very passive in this story. Abraham wrestles with God and tells God, no, you can't kill these people.
Correct.
Isaac's kind of the quiet one.
Jacob wrestles with God.
Yes.
Yes.
Isaac sort of, I don't know how much contact he had with God. He sort of gets Rebecca. Rebecca knows who should be the right son. So there's something very passive about Isaac's relationship with God, and in a way very active about Abraham Obviously, it seems like there's some difference there.
Yeah.
And I don't get, I mean, to me, the wrestling with God of Jacob calls to me a lot more than the passivity of Isaac.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the story is telling us that part of his needing both or what. I don't know what it is. But it seems like there's some very strong differences in their relationships.
So Mike's thinking specifically about the nature of Isaac, who had a relatively passive and somewhat disconnected relationship. Right. A yirah quality with God. So what is it about reaching back to that? And I don't have a specific answer. Again, other than to say that I just think there's really something deep and psychological about how how children naturally individuate and need to push away from their parents at a younger age. And then now that he's really approaching his death, that there's the possibility that he can connect to the God of his father in a new way. And I can't fill that out, but that feels very potent to me. Yvette.
I was just thinking about this week when I was studying it. When someone passes and we say, may their memory be for a blessing or good. To me, it's just a way of keeping that person alive. When I was growing up, my great-grandmother would tell stories of people I had never met. And I still keep them alive because I remember
The stories.
everything she said. And
Yes.
I'm looking at this, and first he's mentioning, the God of his father, but now he's also bringing his father into the story. I also found it interesting because there was one time I actually went to this because it bothered me. After Jacob wrestles with God and he's given the name Israel, when you look at the text of the Torah, there seems to be a distinction of when the Torah calls Jacob Jacob, and when the Torah calls Jacob
True.
Yes.
and one seems to be more Jacob acting on his own, mindset, and the other one seems to veer towards Jacob thinking about his relationship
Very nice.
with God. And I thought it was interesting that it was
It switched here.
not
Great.
Jacob from the previous portion.
Great.
And now he's carrying it on and remembering
Awesome.
to bring his, people alive again.
Yes. So Yvette's bringing 2 points. The first is that when we say, to may somebody's memory be a blessing when they've passed on, part of how we keep that blessing alive are through the stories that we tell. Even when we may not have known somebody, those stories really have a life of their own. And the second part is that it's true. Jacob's name is sometimes he's referred to as Yaakov, Jacob, and sometimes Israel, Yisrael. And perhaps the fact that he's called Yisrael in this case is cluing us into he's in a state of awareness or being, which is appreciative of sort of the bigger scheme of things, not just his own needs and desires being met. Great. All right, Tom, and then we'll wrap it up. Or Sharon, yeah.
Correct.
Nice. Summarize that.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas bring up the issue of specifically cedar and the strength of the cedar and the repeating idea of the cedar trees and what it represents itself. We don't necessarily have that sensitivity, but cedars of Lebanon, for example, throughout the Bible and the Psalms, is a strong, beautiful tree that lasts forever. And so cedar has a metaphoric sense as well, strength to it as well, not just a regular piece of wood. You fit.
All right, Sharon, and then we'll wrap it.
The difference between the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac is the God of Isaac would not be a Caleb. That's the difference. And so
Wow.
Oh, Sharon.
Okay.
Call it,
So
call it.
very different. In this moment, Jacob is going to reunite with his most precious child, and Abraham took his most precious child and
a
was
risk.
willing to sacrifice him.
Wow.
Thankfully, it didn't happen. But so why he's connecting back to Isaac, perhaps, is that sense of the parent who holds a child so close, so dear.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Wow. Kol hakavod, יישר כוח. Amazing conversation about the generations.
Yeah.
Really
Do you
profound.
want to say anything specific?
No, it's I'm good. I'm good.
Great. Yesher koach, everyone.
Okay.
Beautiful learning
You can,
together.
you can hold on to your text if you'd like,
Yeah,
or
you can
pass
hold
them
on to them or pass them to the middle.
Okay.
Some will
We're
come
going to
to
rise
your
together for Chatzi Kaddish of Musaf, page 184.
יתגדל ויתקדש מרבה, במה דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותך וחייך וביומך וחייך בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן דמים ימנו אמן יהי שמרה בממרה ונמולד מהמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה לשמר קודשה בריחו לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן באהבה ועמנו אמן.
We place our feet together, pages 185 through 187. We dive in together. Rest is done silent.
אדוני שפתי תפתח ופיי תהילתך ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק אלוהי יעקב אלוהי שרה אלוהי רבקה אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גם מלך חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות אמהות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר, ופוקד מושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה, אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה, אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה רק להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מחגל חיים בחסד, מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו, לשני עפר, מחמוך בעל גבורות, ומדומה אליו, מלך מביט ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים נריצך ונקדישך כזוציח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש כך כתוב על יד ימיך וכל הזה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות אלוהים כל הארץ כבודו משרתיו שואלים זה לזה, היה מקום כבודו לעומתם, ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבודו ממקומו, הוא יפם ברחמים ויחונם המייחדים שמו, ערב ובוקר בכל יום תמיד, פעמיים באהבה, שמה אומרים, שמה ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד, הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו, והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שנית לעיני כל חי, להיות לכם לאלוהים.
אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור,
אם לא לעולם אלייך ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה.
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפי ומשל לעולם ועד, כי על מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני
בשמו.
האל הקדוש.
Amen. Silent prayer.
Adonai, Tzuri, Adonai, Tzuri, Vegohali, Vegohali.
203.
יתגדל ויתקדש מרבה,
אמן.
והמה דברי חירותי וימליך מלכותי, וחיי חונו ומחון, ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בגלה בזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. יהש מרבה מברך, לעולם עולם ועולם היה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם וינשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו, לעילם מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמם יאמרו אמן. תתקבץ לטון ובטון דחו ישראל, קדם אבהון דבישמי ויאמרו אמן. יהש למרא מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ויאמרו אמן. אין כאלוהינו, אין אדוננו, אין כמלכנו, אין כמושיענו, מי כאלוהינו, מי כאדוננו, מי כמלכנו, מי כמו Moshiachenu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshiachenu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshiachenu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshiachenu, Atahu Shektiru, Avoteinu lefanecha, et toret hasamim, Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצון, ולא עשה בנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא שחולת השמיים. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר באדוני למלך כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
May be seated. Turn to page 207. Invite those observing a yard site or in mourning on this Shabbat Vayigash. Invite you to rise. Kaddish Yatom. 207. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabba. Be'alma divra kirute v'amlich malchute. B'chayechon v'yom echon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam u'lamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitale v'yithalal shmei l'kodesha.
בריחו.
Leila min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Damiran bi'alma v'imru
אמן.
Yehei shlama Rabba min shamaya. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom imromam. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru.
Amen.
Maybe see everyone. Shabbat Shalom. We invite Sandy Bouchard to offer our announcements. Ken? Sandy. Member of the Board of Trustees. Is that you? Were you not prepared for this? Were you not ready for this? Should I do it for you? They're not here. Oh. I see. They're not here. Yes. That is helpful. Okay. So I will cover for you, Sandy. Don't worry. All right. So first of all, we're going to say Mazel Tov to Sophia, Charlotte, and Gabe and their families for being called to the Torah especially, and Mazel Tov to all their families. And I understand they also thank you for sponsoring the Kiddush today. We're going to enjoy that. And it's going to be beautiful outside as well, which I'm psyched about too. Stay tuned for upcoming. We have our services as usual. Monday morning, we have a 7:30 meeting that Rabbi Jenny leads regularly on Zoom. We have Wednesday at 7, and of course tomorrow, Sunday morning at 9. Any other important announcements you made from here in our chevra here? Okay, so my last announcement I want to say, before we invite people who are maybe newish, is that some of you may have saw for Hanukkah, I've another one of these little op-eds. It was put on WRAL. You can go Google it up. It was put in our weekly email. But as a response to that, for those that watch on WRAL, there's a show called On the Record, which is a kind of week in review, kind of our local version of Meet the Press, okay, if that's what you want to call it, something like that, all right? And I'm going to be on it this week, so take a look at it. It comes on tonight and tomorrow morning, and the conversation will be about conversations in the political realm where people call each other on the other side of the aisle the enemy. And is it okay? Because that's some of what my op-ed addressed on Hanukkah, if you'd like to look at. So take a look at for that tonight and tomorrow as well. So with that, we're going to conclude our davening here. Is there anyone here that is here either visiting or here for the first time? We can introduce ourselves. Uh-oh, is that Bonnie's mishpacha there?
Okay, stand up and let's embarrass you. Who are you? How'd you get here? Which part of Westchester are you from? All right. Yes. Awesome. Wonderful. Wonderful. We are elated to have you in town. Welcome to the community. Welcome to God's country. Okay? Way to go. Anybody else we can introduce here and say, anyone who's new or newish or visiting or anyone like that? Going once, going twice? Okay, let you off the hook. Tough. We wrap up, Rabbi Jay, with
Adonai Lam Asher B'Alav B'Terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Ve'et Nasa V'Chefzat Kol Hazai Melech Shemo Nikra Ve'acharei Ki Chod HaKol Levado Yimloch Nora Ve'hu Haya Ve'hu Hoveh Ve'hu Yeh B'Tifara Ve'hu Echad Ve'et Sheni L'Am Shelo Le'Amira Ve'li Reshit Ve'li Tachlit Ve'lo Ha'oz Ve'Hamisra Ve'hu Eli Ve'chai Go'ali Ve'tzor Chevli Ve'et Sara Ve'hu Nisi Umanos Li Menat Kosi Ve'yom Ekra Ve'ado Haviru Ve'et Ishan Ve'ahira Ve'imruchi Geviati Adonai Li Ve'lo Yira Al Keim Merach Adonai et Yom HaShabbat Vayikachehu Savim Baruch et Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Borei Peri Agafen
Amen. L'chaim. Baruch et Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen.
Let's say everyone,
Shabbat Shalom, Mazel Tov.
Food
Shabbat
in the
Shalom.
social hall outside for Kiddush. Shabbat Shalom.